south, no momentum. There's nothing close resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like temping, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Gotta know the Hawks army, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin. We're messing with the penguin.
Okay, it's Monday, June 20th, 2022. Thank you everyone for joining. This is Fepe Akbar, Allergic to Bullshit, featuring Lean Dion. One of the best videos featuring some of the best memeage from across our servers, Discord servers and channels. Okay, so let's see where we are at here. I've just sent out live stream notifications, so I expect there to be an influx. And I don't see a whole lot of bots. A good sign. Portal Complex, Osher, A. Woodward, 7899. Jordan's here, 737. Ivar says, what's up, Thought Criminals? Evil Coyote says, hello, fellow lemurs. Yeah, we're all conspiracy lemurs. And that would be according to the resident conspiracy theory expert, Kelly Weil, over there at the Daily Beast, who said that the reason why we gravitate towards conspiracy theories is that we are primates. And as
susceptible to conspiracy theories because we naturally, as primates, look for patterns. We're susceptible to conspiracy theories because we naturally, as primates, look for patterns.
All right, so we look for patterns. That's all it is. Nothing else to see here. So hello, fellow pattern recognizer, joined by Jordan Maxwell Cooper. We is here. All right, Frank Murr, AJ206, Angst G. All right, a lot of people rolling in. I think messages have gone out there. Good to see you. Spring Corpse and Scott Rankin from Reno. All right, Reno is pretty close to Black Rock City where they do the Burning Man festivals, or used to. I'd be interested to go over there. Who knows what you would dig up. I look at the Burning Man festival as basically the Bohemian Grove for liberals. And it's the same ceremony. And the owl is a distraction in a way from the central rite, which is the burning of a man. And I think that's the same exact ritual that we see performed in May over by the Capitol at the obelisk. They call it Catharsis at the Mall, where they do a little mini Burning Man festival right there. And yes, we are live right now. In fact, someone suggested I put some type of a timer on the screen that shows the minute and the second, and I'll start doing that. I'm searching for widgets, so if anyone has any recommendations, anything you want to recommend to improve the channel, by all means. And we do take things into consideration. I even had a neo-Nazi try to school me on how to run my channel, and I listened to what he had to say. And I promised to not refer to them as such anymore. Apparently it's not accurate. Apparently the Nazis didn't call themselves Nazis, but that's been a slur this whole time, so I didn't know I was being offensive. I'm going to try my best not to offend. Joined here by Salty Siren, Roxy W. We says primates look for patterns. Yeah. Which makes me wonder. It's like, oh, so is she not a primate? I mean, how is she going to say primates look for patterns? That explains their errors. What explains her correctness? But I think the whole narrative with the evolution, if you ask me, and I'm not like necessarily like a biblical creationist. I don't believe in Noah's Ark as a literal thing. I think it's a story. But I do think there's a story that is attached to our modern paradigm, which involves this idea that we started off as apes, and we're moving on to these aliens, which are the technologically superior future selves. Genderless, they're all gray, and they are apparently above human emotions. They're sold to us as superior, almost as like androgynous angels. I think aliens and angels are somewhat synonymous. They're replacements. And so we're somewhere caught between ape and angel or alien, and we just gotta shake off the ape side and become more like that. Embrace technology, embrace space, and leave all the rest behind. And that's what the overview effect is about. So if you haven't looked into the overview effect, and this is huge in the brainwashing program overall, the overview effect. We used to call it the overjaw effect because whenever they do this, whenever they experience it on TV, they open their mouths really wide to suggest that what they're seeing is so awesome. The overview effect is a cognitive shift in awareness reported by astronauts during spaceflight while viewing the Earth from outer space. Apparently, and this is from Wikipedia, so we know it's true, and this is the atheists seeing the face of their God. It is the experience of seeing firsthand the reality of Earth in space, which is now understood to be a tiny, fragile ball hanging in the void with a paper-thin atmosphere. This effect invokes a sense of transcendence and connection with humanity, and national borders appear petty. So from up here, all these distinctions don't matter anymore. They're petty. This is human stuff. You got to leave it behind, leave the world behind, be like the ascended ones, the aliens, the angels, who aren't attached to the world. So this is pretty bad in and of itself, and there's actually a list of people who've had it, this cognitive shift. And there's a couple of things. One, they say when they come back down, their brain is actually kind of stuck higher up in their heads. So these are your elevated, your high priests. And from up there, they can see the face of God. The other thing is, when William Shatner went to space the other day, or a few months ago, but the other day he was talking about this, and he said that he can't stop crying. He can't stop crying. William Shatner says he can't stop crying after his flight with Jeff Bezos because he's concerned about the climate, basically. Here's from the independent.uk. And this solved one of our long-term debates here over who's the better astronaut, Buzz Aldrin or William Shatner. William Shatner now. Buzz Aldrin had him beat because he was a better actor. Shatner's always been a better astronaut, seeing how being an astronaut is just simulating it in different environments. So he has more experience as an actual astronaut. But as an actor, Buzz Aldrin hasn't broken character in 5+ decades. But now that Shatner has crossed the line from being a mere actor astronaut to an actual astronaut, he kind of trumps Buzz. Unless Buzz gets some big movie gig, but there's no way. Anyway, William Shatner can't stop crying. He says, "I'm grieving for the destruction of the Earth." After this event, he even hinted that he's worried about the coming catastrophe, like he knew something. So my point is, if you go up to outer space like this, everything seems petty. Now it's the end. Now the world is in danger. It needs to be saved. And that's the other part of it. When they come back down, they feel a need to save the world. They feel this sense of oneness with everything. In August 2020, anthropologist Deanna Weibel introduced the parallel term ultra-view effect. And this is caused by the intense awe they experience when looking at star fields. And she discusses the impact of the overview effect and the ultra-view effect on the astronauts' religious beliefs. So now, this is from Michael Collins' Apollo 11, but now they just added William Shatner to the list. But there's a list of people who've had it. Interestingly enough, you have Scott Kelly. He's had it, but you know who hasn't had it? His twin brother, Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's in politics. So it kind of explains something about this overview effect. Like, he didn't rise above politics, but Scott did. So the thing, and this is from Michael Collins, the thing that really surprised me was that the Earth projected an air of fragility. And why, I don't know. To this day, I had a feeling it's tiny, it's beautiful, it's home, and it's fragile. So the key word is fragile. They all see how fragile it is. So again, now this is where it gets interesting to me. One, you have to know this is total BS. The people in the ISS, or the ones going into these little space tourist trips into close to the Kármán line, they don't even go to space. Shatner and company, or when Branson went up there. But my point is, they don't go far enough away from the Earth to even see if it's a ball. Like there's no way you could see the Earth as a ball suspended in space from the height of the ISS. So they're not getting the overview effect. They're lying. They're faking the overview effect. But now look at this. So this is what I'm suggesting, that this is their way of reintroducing the concept of a religious experience. So in 2018, the Space Buzz project was created so children can experience the overview effect. They're not going to send them into space. Nope. Space Buzz will give children an overview effect by using virtual reality so they can have the same insights that the astronauts have had while seeing the planet from space. This to me, this is brainwashing. This is like MK Ultra. you put your kid in a tank, an isolation tank with half ton of Epsom salts and a waterproof VR headset, and you have them levitate till they can see the earth from up there, and then they come out, and now they're suddenly like Democrats and they believe in climate change. Like, this is brainwashing. This is some sort of baptism into the cult of scientism where they show you the face of God. This is tied into the idea of collective consciousness, of course. And the idea here, again, is technology as savior. And if you can get high enough, you have this view. And you haven't been that high, you haven't seen it from their point of view. All right, let's see who else is here. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. It is again 6/20/2022. A lot of things to talk about today. I think the title of the live stream was Warning Words. Yeah, words ahead. Yeah, I'm trying not to antagonize or create any unnecessary friction. I do genuinely have an interest in how people arrive at their conclusions, even if I don't agree with their conclusions. And that's why I keep this open platform. And in the last few days, we've had some interesting conversations with some internet people I previously would have described as neo-Nazis, and then I learned that's not what they call themselves, because that's actually a slur. So I was making some interesting comparisons, in my view, to the mentality, though, of any kind of collectivist cult, any sort of groupthink, and how they view the outsider, and how you always get branded the outsider according to their system. So the Scientologist might call you an SP. If you leave the Islamic faith, you might be an apostate. I don't know what the name for them is. You have different terms, heretic, but there's always a name for the other. And I've been called many of these names from many different groups. I've been called you've all been called, and you didn't take this as a slander, but when they called you a super spreader, that was something of a slander, in my opinion. It's like calling you a sinner. Well, what if you don't belong to that church? Do you accept their designation that you are a sinner? These are interesting concepts, but like, do you have to take their labels according to their definition? And everybody pretty much can condemn everybody else. And in our Discord server this morning, we got into a conversation because people have different views over what the name of the god is. And one person talked about the lake of fire that I'd be going to. And I asked a simple question of, well, what about my deceased relatives? Are they in the lake of fire because they didn't have the name right? And the answer was kind of walking back a little bit, saying, well, we don't know, which is better. Because if you really think about it, suggesting someone's going to go to hell forever is kind of it's a heavy thing to say. And it's almost like saying you should go to jail for what you've said. So I'm not so quick to condemn people. Okay, let us continue here. This is Lord is Life says, I love how this is an all-day thing. Yeah, one of the ways we've become very censorship resistant is we maintain our think tank. So many people are tucked away in the Discord servers out of necessity, but we also have this. This think tank here is our public think tank. It's the alternative to the server. I like to have this one open, but they constantly shoot it down. But we try to maintain an open door policy to new ideas and new people. So it's not only paid members. There's no screening necessarily. We vet the ideas as they arrive. Thanks for joining Auto Hoaxer, Polecat78. A Woodward78 says, an article today says ketchup shortage was due to global warming. Yeah, I'm waiting for them to blame the food factory fires on climate change and the school shootings, climate change. They actually do this. I've actually seen Bill Nye the Science Guy blame global warming for radical Islamists shooting up a Christmas party at their place of work. And the way he argued it was this. He said, well, the global warming causes their farms, their ancestral homelands, their farmlands to dry up. So they go to the cities for work. But they can't get work because of the economic instability caused by war for oil, which is what causes the climate change in the first place. So now you have the disaffected youth who can't get jobs in the cities. They can't work where they would have worked if it weren't for climate change. They know climate change is caused by America. Political and economic instability caused by America. So they're easy recruits for terrorists. So they come over to America and they shoot up America. So basically we deserve it. That was Bill Nye the Science Guy's rationale. He even argued that people who don't believe in climate change have cognitive dissonance and are psychologically ill. I mean, this guy's a psycho, or rather, he's just a puppet. But if you listen to what they're actually saying, he is the head of the Mars Society, and the whole Martian project is actually nothing more than dressing communism up like it's the Jetsons and selling it to the people who know better than to listen to the whole WEF Great Reset thing and buy into the whole green world order. But you will accept it if you go to the red planet. And you don't even have to go. You just have to accept the premise that that's the way to do it because that's what they're doing. It's a utopian thing. Thanks for joining, Rocco. Says aloha, everybody. A Restless Bear said, I heard Sean Hannity referring to climate change believers as religious cultists. Yeah, it's about time. And I've been putting this out there for a while now, but they're walking around signs that say the end is near. So they're saying the end is near. And I had an interesting message from someone the other day who suggested that maybe climate change is going to happen and it is real and it is going to be a judgment from God, like in the days of Noah or whatever, but that they're using the excuse to blame it on the Republicans and blame it on man so we don't recognize it's God's judgment. And, interesting. We'll see. We will see. By the way, global warming turns 34 next week. So it's still in its 33rd year. And generally, when you have some big psyop, they tend to encode these things with numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to manifest something believable. But so far, no. Ocean levels have not gone up an inch. I really don't. I think they're just short on evidence, which is why they went from global warming to climate change. They've also tied it in. There's a couple of points we could bring up here, and this was really highlighted. And this is predictive programming. Let's go back to this topic here. Yeah, we all know they want to brainwash the kids by showing them the face of their fake globe and telling them this is now your purpose in life is to unify this thing so we can save it. It's a great ploy, and I think it's pretty much going to work. But anyway, I want to also open phones here in a moment. I want to go through my notes before we get too off course. Jordan says, I don't believe Assange is real because there have been CGI glitches in his interviews. I don't take whistleblowers all that seriously unless they call out perception management disguised as news. And most of them don't. You realize all of these various whistleblowers operate from the premises set by the world stage on like literally everything. Like they believe the official story of 911, the official story of COVID, except maybe with a twist. But generally speaking, if they're not talking,
susceptible to conspiracy theories because
sorry, that was Kelly Weil.
Naturally,
if they're not talking about conspiracy theories, crisis actors, as more than just a conspiracy theory, but as a fact, as an observation, then they're kind of hiding the nature of the system. So they're not even whistleblowers. And you notice there haven't been any crisis actor whistleblowers. Okay, here on the screen, I had to bring this back up because we were talking about climate change. Noah and climate change, modern flood myth, fear of God, fear of globe. Okay, so what is the story here? How come Noah NOAA Science Service and Stewards, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, how come they're allowed to just appropriate the dove, appropriate the flood myth and their ark, and they have their own little warning satellite, like their own little angel that warns them, and they have their doomsday prophecies. So to me, this is pretty obvious that this is stolen, but my point is, how come they're not owning the biblical nature of this? And I assume both of these are just scare tactics that elite use to control people. I don't assume one to be real, one to be fake. But that's the interesting part about this type of stuff, is that one side will say, oh yeah, it's real, but God's doing it. And the other side says, no, it's real, but man's doing it because there is no God. But they both accept the central premise. And that's what I mean. These are just controlled debates. The truth might be somewhere, not necessarily even in the middle, but just not even on their stage. Battery 79 says they're trolling us with Noah. Absolutely. It's got to be a troll. I dug through their site. I looked for evidence that they said, oh, we were inspired by the biblical thing. No, they weren't. And I started noticing all these headlines about the floods and Noah So I realized, okay, so they have the phonetic resemblance, they use the symbolism, it's the same basic story. So it kind of got me thinking that maybe the idea here is your carbon footprint is a replacement for your original sin. So you're born in sin, and our collective wickedness is what ensures our destruction. And of course, the idea is that you can undo it. You can repent. So they teach you to recycle. They teach you to go green. They teach you to change the way you live to do the least amount of harm to the world, to live in harmony with it. So if you just replace God for globe, angry God for heating globe, and replace sin and wickedness for carbon footprint, then you have kind of an idea of how they've replaced these things. And of course, this also explains this idea that there's so many people, and these are the more people there are, the less resources, the world can't take it. Yeah, this is all basically, I think, programming. Joined by Sergeant Peterson. Thanks for joining. Yes, this is live. And if you don't want to miss anything, go ahead and join the newsletter. Just go to infiniteplanesociety.com and get the free notifications. You can also go to infiniteplane.media and get on text alerts. And thanks again to all the supporters, Tommy King and many others. Those of you who've been pitching in, we keep the text alerts going and everything else. And this channel is definitely not ever going to shut down. We keep the 24/7 going because we've been doing this since 2017, and I'm playing through the archives. In fact, I'm going to probably set the archives back to 2018 and go back and just have it consistently going back. But we always keep this thing going because we want to maintain the think tank, and we want to maintain these different conversations and resist the censorship by having videos that are so large that YouTube can't even process them. So if some snowflake has a problem with this video, well, it's 90 hours long. Good luck. It'll be a while. 5 minutes of fame says holler to my IPR fam. Thanks for joining. 5 minutes of fame. Also joined by Biden's grandchildren. I noticed that the emoji of the snake on YouTube looks like a duck. I was like, why are these green ducks just popping up next to my name? Who's calling me a duck? No, I'm a snake. Anyway, they laughed at Noah, and here we are laughing at climate change hysterics, and then you even got people like Sean Hannity calling them religious cultists. Okay, so let's go through some of the headlines here. ISS dodges space debris from the Soviet-era Cosmos 1408 satellite. So I haven't looked into the meaning of 1408 or anything like that. There tends to be a lot of code with these things, but the main story is, one, this is all colored pencil. This is airbrush. I mean, it's good art. I mean, this is a piece of junk, a 1408 satellite, but it looks like a 1970s era illustration. Why can't they just show us a picture of the Earth from space? This looks like it's made out of Legos, so quite literally, this is Legos. Okay, here we go. A couple problems here, another one. So first, yeah, the ISS was forced into an unscheduled maneuver to avoid Russian space debris. Russia's anti-satellite weapon test destroyed the Soviet-era Cosmos 1408 satellite. Okay, so they just shot one of their old satellites down, according to this story, if you want to believe it. Now, I brought this up how last year they really started hyping up the threat of space junk. It really started in February with those plane parts falling in Broomfield, Colorado, which has a lot of interesting tie-ins to the Donnie Darko movie, if you look into that particular scene of plane parts falling from the sky. But as the year progressed, I was pointing out how this was being introduced as a concept, and how you had movies on Netflix like The 100, where season 1, episode 13, 113, the space station comprised of 13 parts falls, breaks apart in the sky. Then you have Don't Look Up, you have Moonfall, you have Raised by Wolves on HBO. There's a whole list of movies in the science fiction genre right now, very popular, that have been inundating the popular imagination with space junk falling from the sky, just like they prepared us for 9/11 and falling buildings, just like we're being prepared for Seattle and the Space Needle to take some kind of a hit. These are things that we're kind of guided into. They get you to accept the premise with a lot of art. So it's not a coincidence that now, here we are, after the ISS had its cracks, after the Russians have already said that they're leaving. Now all of a sudden, it's becoming a problem. They're having to dodge it, and apparently they had to move like because it was within a half mile of hitting them. So a piece of space junk, 17,000 miles per hour, and the first time it got hit with space junk was last summer. It got hit in the arm by a piece of junk during a mission called Celestial Immunity. While the astronauts on board were testing out vaccines, the ISS's arm got vaxxed. So many bots. I'm pretty sure that's a bot. It says, "Hi, I miss you so much." Yeah, go ahead and kill the bots. That's what the wrenches are for. They had another issue too. One of their boosters didn't fire properly. Here we go. Cygnus freighter ISS boosting engine ends its burn suddenly. It's unclear what happened. Now, if you remember last year too, and I suggested this even in my book, Metascript Decoded, I said it's going to be shot down by the Russians in all likelihood. And there was an instance where a Russian booster had, quote, accidentally misfired and caused a space station to flip 540 degrees. But anyway, their boosting engine burn ended early for some reason. So I'm just noting problems here and there, dodging junk. Of course, we don't get any decent video of any of this stuff. Slave Rescue Hound says Matt Williams' new comedy special is titled WW3. Oh, Cat Williams. I'll check it out. Oh, Hot Booty has a wrench. Okay, that's a bot. We have a lot of bots. It went from different types of bots, dating apps, bots trying to convert me to some new religion. We had I don't know what you call them, bots with an affinity for Hitler. Anyway, QAnon influencers are now reportedly defrauding their followers via cryptocurrency scams. Yeah, the true believers of the Q movement, it's like a religion. They just throw their money in the collection basket. They're just giving it all to JFK. That story is still the central thing, and it's not going to go away. They're not going to go away. There are too many of them drinking the Kool-Aid. And if you look at who's behind this entire thing, I mean, General Flynn's connection to the I Am Temple, the Church Universal Triumphant, and that whole Saint Germain thing, this is high-level New Age theosophy. I mean, this is a big mind control on full display here. And they've kind of repurposed the Second Coming story for this Donald Trump campaign, and they've mixed it with other things. We've talked about how Keep America Great, the Keep America Great campaign was actually organized by Trump's son-in-law, who worked with the guy who did the PR and all the, I guess you would say he was the promoter for The Purge. Like, that's interesting. The Purge, because remember, Keep America Great was actually from The Purge. And so they hired the guy who publicized it to market their 2020 campaign. Yep. Donald Trump 2020 presidential slogan is the tagline of The Purge. But yeah, they worked together on these things. And why was this? Because I think they wanted to sell us on the idea of a country falling apart and needing to be saved. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. All right. Let me open phones here too. I wanted to go through some of my notes and we'll comment on these. I don't want to be redundant, so if you brought up a topic I haven't had time to investigate, I will. But generally, I get around to it right away. Someone asked me about this one. Apparently, there was some predictive programming on Project Runaway, and I looked into it, and I remember this one. It was I believe it was a model named COVID, and COVID Kapoor, and so it's a 2019 scene, and in this clip, which went viral on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, apparently this person named COVID is wearing a mask. And so Reuters is here saying it's not predictive programming. It's like, well, how do you say it's not? By definition, it kind of is. We can't prove that this person knew what they were doing. You know, there's this like level of ignorance, I think. I mean, how would you know? how this stuff's going to be repurposed or recontextualized. And this stuff is pretty nuanced. I don't think they would all know. I mean, there are some people who don't have that plausible deniability. Like, I'm pretty sure that Ellen DeGeneres knows that her stage looks like Epstein Island. If you look at the Epstein Island, it's got the palm trees and the blue and white striped temple. Yeah, that's the exact same scenery that Ellen DeGeneres has. And I'm pretty sure she knows. Anyway, listen to this. Users sharing the video are referring to this as a plandemic, and they're taking this as proof that the government or other higher-ups are using fictional movies or books as a mass mind control tool to make the population more accepting of planned future events. So that's a pretty good definition, but they haven't debunked it. But is that not exactly what we're talking about here? Where culture is known to be the place where you want to put your ideas if you want to reach people's political decisions. And so entertainment is kind of like the area where they focus most of their messaging. So why is that a theory? Again, this is explained by Ohio State University. The term refers to the, quote, theory that the government uses higher-ups to use, anyway, appropriating fictional movies for mass mind control. That's just propaganda. Anyway, the person's name is Kovid Kapoor, who created an outfit with red and black fabric, including a matching face mask. Now, if you haven't seen it, it's part of some TV show I've never watched before, but it's kind of undeniable. All right, I don't know if it's going to play here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. So what do you think? This hideous costume looks like something that they were, I mean, did they sell this? Project Runaway, did they sell this during the pandemic? You know, for people to wear during lockdown while they're watching more Netflix? There's a great deal of predictive programming with the artist Future and his song Masks Off, which came out on 4/18/2017, and then Mizell, or the judge, whose name sounds like muzzle, lifted the mask mandates on 4/18/2021. Just kind of another one of these coincidences. But I like how Reuters fact-checked it. And in their fact-checking, they said, verdict, this is not predictive programming. There is no evidence to suggest this was deliberately planned. Nothing to see here. Yeah, that clip went viral. I remember that clip originally. And I don't know how popular that is, but that's the thing. They inundate the public's mind with these things. That's why I point out that space junk. The fact is, whether you believe in space junk or not, you can now conceptualize it. And they use concurrent programming for a lot of PSYOP reinforcement. I think it was pretty apparent with these last two shootings where you had the Stranger Things offering a lot of the visuals that you would need to get the full experience. So you might watch the school shooting footage or the coverage, but you're not going to see any actual dead kids. But then you watch Netflix and it says, warning, this season might remind you of what just happened in Texas. And you push play and it's a bunch of dead children. Like, clearly they are using the entertainment concurrently to bolster the news. Anyway, that was from KC Duncan. He said, have you seen the video of the actor called Kovid who wears the face mask in 2019? Now I got a question. I mean, look, this is a valid question too. Like, there are many channels that focus on paranormal. I was with the Dark Matter Digital Network for a while, but I wasn't really producing content that was appropriate for that because I'm not into paranormal. Like, I don't spend a lot of time talking about Bigfoot. It does not entertain me. And I think there's pretty good reason to believe that what people think is Bigfoot is actually just bears walking on their hind legs, which they're apt to do. And if you've ever seen a bear stand up on its legs and just walk and look at you, look around, like, yeah, you could see how from any distance that would look like a Bigfoot. It would meet all the criteria. There's no reason to jump to supernatural being. That shouldn't even be on the list of options. But I don't spend a lot of time on it. But if someone came into my chat and called me a Bigfoot denier and then said, you're just trying to cover up for Bigfoot, and if they accuse me of being a malicious person and a liar and that people shouldn't trust me because I don't talk about Bigfoot, I don't know how to help them because I literally don't care about Bigfoot. There's a lot of pet theories I don't care about. I'm not here to be converted to anybody's pet theory about how the Bible actually is supposed to, be written. People have all their ideas, but like, I think we have to think and let think more or less. But I have this person in the chat who's hyper obsessed with his version of the Bigfoot story. And I don't care about his story. And because I'm not going to spend all my time on it, he seems a little vindictive. So if you see the person in chat, let him go. I'm not interested in censoring somebody, but I think you have to understand that we all have our own perspectives and we can't all arrive at your conclusion. You're welcome to create content though, but I don't see at any point myself taking a big interest in someone whose starting point is calling me some ethnicity that I don't think I am. It's kind of weird to me. But this is a common thing on YouTube. Whenever you hit 1,000 subs, we notice whenever you hit 1,000 subs, you get all these racial collectivists. And one of the things we do on this channel is we talk about the news and the media, and we analyze facts. And I've never really been into collectivism or groupthink. So I don't think he's trying to assimilate me into his tribe or his group necessarily, but I don't know what his objectives are. But anyway, yeah, we got sex bots, we got anti-Semite bots, we got all kinds of bots, and feel free to ban bots if you want. I'm not trying to police anybody's thoughts here. Nicole Simpson was out there at the Vatican today spreading the rumor that the Pope was about to step down. Totally a false rumor, misinformation. RJ1620 in there said, I hear you used to be Nicole Simpson. Oh, I should have said Megyn Kelly. Sorry, it's a reflex. Megyn Kelly. Anyway, she's actually addressed this once. They did a little bit of damage control. Is Megyn Kelly actually Nicole Simpson? I'm like 99% on it. And speaking of the Pope, I was doing a little bit of research into stuff we've already discussed before, but interesting connections between the Pope, the number 666, and sun worship, and how consistent this is and why you see this number associated with sun worship. And this is also why you see the 666 with the World Economic Forum. It has to do with this particular idea, which we'll get into. Yeah, look, I wasn't trying to debunk Bigfoot anybody. I was just using it as an analogy. I think that some people advance things with very bad argumentation, and I just don't see myself putting a lot of time into being a spokesmouth for someone else's idea that they haven't really thought out. Yellowstone Kraken Tentacle National Parks, Wyoming. What is this? Someone just sent me this. Flee America. It's got a kraken coming out of Yellowstone National Park. Just a poster. Interesting imagery, though. Okay, commenter says, look, this is what we went through already. He says, you guys are clueless. IPS will make sure it stays that way. Ban me again. They always do this. They throw themselves on the ground and they say, oh, I'm so oppressed. I'm being censored. I'm being banned. Look at him oppress me. I'm not going to oppress you. I'm not going to ban you. And apparently I have the power to take this platform and mold the minds of the 100 people listening so they don't know what this guy in the chat knows. So like, you know what? I would say start your own channel and start teaching people. That's what I would do if I was you. If I was gifted with the knowledge that could save the world, I would weaponize that knowledge and I would be a hero. I wouldn't sit here and lament about my inability to do anything, my impotence, on someone else's channel who's not into my thing. Like I'm literally not into it. And I'm a full-blown denialist of that white replacement theory that they've attached to Tucker Carlson and the Buffalo shooter. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I've been accused of eating too much plastic and soy, which I again, throwing a fit. You can all see it though. This is part anthropology. It's the reason why we tolerate this stuff. Because we're talking about belief systems, worldviews, and when worldviews collide. When one group that has all the answers confronts another group that has all the answers. I was really impressed by the inability of Bible literalists to get together and agree on anything. You know, like we can agree a stop sign means stop. Maybe we can't. Not everyone comes to a full stop. But Bible literalists, if you put like three or four of them in a closed room, they would only one would come out alive. Like that's kind of how they operate. Anyway, look, the guy who's been, I don't want to use the word trolling, expressing himself by trying to antagonize me or whatever. He's actually been doing this for about 12 hours. We've seen him in the chat all day, on and off, and I'm not sure the motivation, but I'm inclined to suspect that once you hit 1,000 subs, the agencies send people because he called in to promote Tucker Carlson's white replacement theory, and I was like, we already kind of rejected that as blue pill narrative crafting to convince the public that you got these extremists just like in the Batman movie and they're going to go out and shoot people up. So I didn't really think it was a real thing. But he comes in here talking about it like it's real. And I'm like, could be military intel. So he called and, you know, he said some things which I don't care. Words don't really bother me. But they reveal more about the person who says them and what is in their frame of reference and who is in their circle. You can tell by the words people use quite a bit. You can kind of contact trace those words and say, okay, this is what he's plugged into. These are the sites that he's been to. But I did do a search on his number, and it did turn up an email address that that is connected to a military academy in Georgia. So I think we do have people from some kind of military bot farm, some kind of psyops unit that scours YouTube and spreads the things that the media is going to use to demonize the right. Because right now the DHS is pushing the idea of white nationalist terrorists. And so to create the perception that there are such, I think they want to hijack platforms and make it seem like, yeah, these guys are everywhere and they're dangerous. And they feel like they're being replaced. And some of the stuff they come out with is just kind of, you know, foolishness. Like he was saying, the Jews invented the vaccines. I'm like, I don't even believe that vaccines are deadly. So that theory doesn't really frighten me. And we already talked about this before. The anti-vax is just counter narrative to pro-vax. And I think the real objective, in my opinion, is the schism that is created in society. 5 Minutes of Fame says, I talked about Bigfoot. It's fine if Tim does not care. Actually, if you have an experience, I'd like to hear about it. I actually do like to hear people's takes on Bigfoot. I have heard some interesting things. I have. Because where I live in New Mexico is like a few hours closer to Arizona. There are a lot of stories about this stuff. Old stories that are way older than X-Files and Weekly World News tabloids, but stories that are attached to regional mythologies and stuff. So I don't just disregard it, but I disregard the industry. And I disregard the arguments that say, I was in the woods and I heard something, and I think it was a Sasquatch. I'm like, well, no, there's a logical fallacy there. It's the non sequitur. You put all the possibilities on the table first and rule those out. Then you can bring in impossibilities. But if you jump to that, I don't know. Maybe you want to believe it. Celestial Wonder says, I don't deal with idiots. Right, I understand. I don't want to bring the level of discourse on this channel down to the level of that. And it's because of this. I describe this picture as being like a million piece puzzle, and we're putting the pieces together. And when someone comes in and they say, I've already solved the puzzle, it's right here, and I look at it, it's like, well, that's a really small puzzle, very myopic, and it looks like you crunched all the pieces together. It's kind of jagged at the edges. Like, it just doesn't work with me, because the one I've seen is way bigger and it's not complete. So anybody trying to sell me a complete worldview, I'm not going to be an easy sell. And I could recommend you to some other people, or the channels, but I'm not going to be that easy. It's, to me, I don't plan to have all the answers for years. I don't plan to have all the answers I mean, it depends. I mean, who knows? Something could break. Commenter says, I don't live in a military base. I'm leaving now. Bye. All right. Thanks for letting us know. Have a great night. 833-311-1984 if you ever want to call in. Okay, I have a video of the space station dodging space junk. Tony Driscoll says Sasquatches notice patterns. Yeah, they must. I bet there are Sasquatch conspiracy theorists too. Now, I didn't say military base, by the way. It was like a cadet thing. So I was like, well, maybe this is some kind of like ROTC guy who's been given a task. Like they have cubicles and like they're all just trolling. This is troll armies are a thing. And we are on Rofkin. I just haven't turned it. I have to turn it on. I have to manually do that, and I will. I actually like Rofkin. And you know what? Someone messaged me. I think it was PGA, Post Globe Awareness, and I'll play one of his tracks just so you're up to speed if you don't know. But anyway, PGA has a copy of the Christchurch Was Fake AF documentary. So I'm going to be putting that up onto Rofkin tonight or tomorrow once I download it. I'm queuing one of his tracks for later, Black Sheep. Okay, on the screen here, we're looking at 1903 UTS Progress MS-20 performed an unplanned engine burn to avoid space debris. So it's not Star Wars, it's not all that exciting, but basically they fire up an engine to move half a mile out of the way from a piece of space debris from Cosmos 1408, an old Soviet-era satellite that Russia just blew up with one of their anti-satellite ballistics. And they didn't sign the Outer Space Treaty where it says they won't use these things. All right. It's 33 Ren says Rofkin has a nice interface. Yeah, here's a few of the things I like about it. Oh, it's Rokfin, R-O-K, excuse me. Habit. It's either a habit or a Mandela effect. If I was a Mandela affected, I would say that's what it was, because I wouldn't be capable of admitting that I'm wrong. Okay, so what we have here is rofkin.com/infiniteplaneradio. A few of the things about it. One, I can archive stuff that is banned everywhere else, even BitChute. That was the whole thing about the Christchurch documentary, is that these things were on BitChute where they should have been safe, and they were pulled. So we actually lost access to all that stuff. I couldn't even download it. It also has a blog section and a few other things. But anyway, I will send links to Rofkin. I'll put a link at infiniteplane.media so more of you can check it out. I was not planning on using their platform at first, but when I realized that not even BitChute will let you hang on to stuff, then what's the point? Just search Infinite Plane Radio. We are joined by M.E. Sagittarius Armed Society. Garrett Summer says Vatican is a snake. Yeah, I've seen the snake stuff. I have seen it. The serpent-looking interior of that Vatican Hall, it just looks like you're in the inside of like you're staring at a big snake. It's insane. Snakes have always been associated with like sun worship for some weird reason as well. You can't really separate the two. But again, if you're looking on the screen, you're supposed to be excited. If you're not, you're probably just not a true believer in this, or it doesn't look real to you. Supposedly you're seeing the dodging of space junk. So this is sort of you add some of the actual soundtrack from the video from Roscosmos, and it actually looks better. But yes, they confirmed the debris was their fault. They called it space debris, so they shot something down and they had to dodge it. Now this again is just, I think, preparation for what's coming next, and that's going to be the advent of space junk Armageddon. And how many times did they threaten to drop 500 tons of metal on us with the space station? And there have been several drills. See, the public doesn't have a memory This is the TikTokification of the public mind. It's just fragmented. So you don't put two and two together. Like in May 2019, they do a drill called the fictional event, which involves simulating a big piece of junk falling in New York. A year later, a piece of Chinese space junk almost lands in New York, or put them on alert. It landed in the Pacific, I guess. But this is a reoccurring theme. Remember last year, you had that booster from a Chinese rocket that landed in the Indian Ocean. So it's a reoccurring theme, but they have to get you acclimated to it to make it believable. Yeah, you can find all the links below the video if you're wondering what platforms that we're on. Russian spacecraft forced to dodge debris blown up by satellite. This is a very, here we go, very viral story right now. And again, one more time, if you ever look at the ISS, just take a look at some of the ways they represent it and zoom in a little bit, and you might notice something about the solar panels and how often they kind of style their photos to make it look like the Twin Towers. And there are some angles more than others that make it look like you're seeing the Twin Towers. And I think there's some significant symbolism inherent in this thing. And I've already made connections between Kubrick's work, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the space plane heading toward the twin-cylindered space station in that movie, and Flight 175's impact of the Twin Towers. How these are overlapping images, and how I'm thinking what we're seeing is the tie-in, where we're seeing Kubrick's work extends not just Apollo 11 and 9/11, but also the bringing down of the space station. And I think this is further bolstered by the fact that when Bezos took off 9 days after Branson in his space plane on the 42nd anniversary of Skylab falling to the ground, 9 days later Bezos launches at 9/11. Again, Bezos, modern day Nimrod, gets eaten by the Kraken on a TV show making fun of 9/11 conspiracy theories. So a lot of space 9/11 tie-ins here. It's just a matter of time. Battery says Stavely is going to do a Mandela video on Rockfin. I don't think it's approved. They only accept approved Mandela effects. And by the way, we are working on a documentary about the Mandela effect right now, if you're on our Discord server. It's a work in progress. Expect to have most of the footage and content and interview stuff done by the 30th, and I'll be in full edit mode for a few days, but it's going to be released on July the 18th. It's not a debunk necessarily, it's a documentary. And there's kind of a difference. We're more objective. 1/5 of Americans believe every school shooting is fake, filled with crisis actors. 1/5. And that number probably, it might actually be accurate. That's how far this notion has gone. That's how far the truth has gone. But most of them aren't as nuanced as we are here. Most of them believe people probably died. They probably think it's false flagging or it's some kind of people don't have the full story if they're not accounting for how much control the media has, how much it's just perception management, not actual reporting. Coincidence or not, 97 fires have destroyed or damaged U.S. food processing plants. I see panic on the right, and I see dismissiveness on the left, and we're looking at a backdrop of, well, Soylent Green 2022. That would be the predictive programming. And check this one out. Jack Posobiec posted this. So Jurassic World is about a pharma company that uses a DNA altering pathogen to destroy farmland and deliberately causes a worldwide food crisis to force everyone to buy their products. So I didn't watch Jurassic World. I heard it was terrible. It looks terrible. I might watch it now. Battery says 1 in 5. That seems high. It does seem high, but they're probably just suggesting maybe it's half the Republicans, or they probably have some way of arriving at this. I don't know a single person, but I don't know anyone who watches the news at the level we do. Most people watch it as a form of Like they get it by osmosis. They just have it on. They just kind of believe it's all real. They're just getting this gradual kind of sense of being informed, but it's kind of passive, is what I mean. Like, well, if you don't have time to watch it, you know it's true. Otherwise, they would have told you that it's fake, and you can just catch up if you need to. But what we do here is more like real-time media deconstruction, which involves looking at the past, looking at patterns, and of course, looking at the subtexts. 5 Minutes of Fame says 9 out of 11 believe in conspiracy theories. Oh yeah, this eventually. On the right, it would be. On the left, though, see, here's the thing: right wing is considered conspiracy theories. Everything they say. To the left, they have the backing of science. But when you really get down to it and you analyze their narratives, is it any more of a conspiracy to say that global warming is caused by man and the ocean levels are going to rise than it is to say that chemtrails are causing the weather to change? You know, these are kind of parallel conspiracy theories, but one has the label of science and the other's a bunch of kooks. But I look at the conspiracy theorists as more sensible when it's the ones that have the backing of science who are stopping traffic in the UK, blocking the roads, carrying signs saying, we're all going to die, the world's going to end. Sean Hannity is absolutely right when he said that we're looking at a religious cult when you're looking at global warming. And maybe I don't have to listen to see if he goes far enough, but I'm saying that they quite literally have replaced the punishing, vengeful flood god in that myth, that idea of a retribution from above. They've replaced it with this scientific story about, or the scientific observation that man is going to cause it if we don't change our ways. And it just so conveniently parallels these things. But you're anti-science if you don't accept it. And I'm like, what a clever way to get you to believe in just another extortionist god that wants your money. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's like, give us your best produce, give us your virgins, make your sacrifices to the priest, or the volcano is going to erupt over the village. It's this extortion plot. What do you think cap and tax, carbon taxes, you're recycling? Why are you recycling? Well, they've made a parallel concept with confession. So you're born with the original sin, you're a carbon super spreader, just by virtue of being alive. So you go through your decisions and you're like, okay, you go through your trash, which is a record of your decisions. And your decisions that aren't recyclable, that aren't sustainable, that weren't necessary, yeah, those ones will stare at you in the face now as wrong. When you take the other ones, the good ones, over to the altar, the green cube with the six-pointed star comprised of 3 arrows, and you put your recyclables in there to show the globe god that you actually made some good choices. So you kind of expiate your guilt for the floods and for climate change. And let me bring up the Bronx fire on this topic of climate change. I meant to get to this earlier. On 1/9/2022, January 9th, a 19-story building was reported to have been on fire with 19 dead. So the initial story was January 9th, a Bronx fire leaves 19 dead. And this was the Northwest Tower, is the Twin Parks. So you had a lot of 19s, a lot of twin. You had a number of interesting things here having to do with the numbers they use here to kind of associate it with 9/11. But then here's where the communist or the Marxist environmentalist subtext comes in here. A faulty space heater caused the fire. So when you look at space heaters, then there's a question of, well, why did they have to use space heaters? And so now they're saying that space heaters are actually kind of a symbol of how the rich have ruined the environment and the poor have to really take all the have to suffer the consequences. Now these are symbols of inequity. Deadly Bronx fire puts focus on space heaters as symbols of inequity. And again, this is a kind of twofold. One, they can't afford to heat their homes, so they have to use space heaters, which puts them at risk. And they're poor because of the system is not fair. So you have that aspect of it being a sign of, inequality. But then also, the other side of it is capitalism itself has so damaged the environment that they require these heaters in the first place. Where If it weren't for climate change, maybe the weather wouldn't be so extreme. So you have a few different ways to blame this on the political right, on capitalism, on private property, on what they call Western chauvinism. And it's not a coincidence that the same attorney representing these families is the one at all the various very charged psyops from George Floyd to well, pretty much anything involving the police and the narrative of police brutality. You got Benjamin Crump. I think we called him Forrest Crump because he's at every one of these sites. And there were even crisis actors at this event chanting or saying that they couldn't breathe. Most people compared this thing to the movies. Listen to this one. The space heater for me is the scariest thing. So again, my point is this fire brought up space heaters as symbols of inequity. Had all kinds of 9/11 tie-ins. The main thing though that I took out of this too is space heaters. Well, up above we have the space war heating up. And that's kind of what we're looking at here now with the junk situation above, with the space station having to dodge debris because Russians are shooting down their old satellites. You can see where it's tying in here because the division up above is between space communists and space capitalists. Bezos, Branson, Musk are representatives. They represent the West. Bezos clearly wears a cowboy hat to space. He takes Captain Kirk. They see it as a new frontier, somewhere to exploit. He's building a literal Tower of Babel. Jeff Bezos' Amazon Helix headquarters in Virginia is a literal Tower of Babel. Amazon, A to Z, getting everything under one umbrella, this one world system. International Space Station represents this Tower of Babel in many ways because it's international. All the nations, one mission from the Earth to space, one language. That would be the internet. So we have this pretty strong storyline built up here of how the Western space leaders, I guess the space popes is what I've been calling them, space papacy, the billionaire blimp club, because the rockets, if you didn't know, are fake. They're cylindrical blimps with jet assisted takeoff, and they use CGI when they cut to the next scene. But they created this split up above where it's clearly a division between capitalists and communists, and they don't want the capitalists to drag down $1 trillion worth of wealth because the world can't handle many more billionaires, at least according to the global warming narrative. So what's going to happen with, well, trillionaires? And then you go back to the movie Don't Look Up. Now remember, the Titanic is a metaphor for the West. The iceberg is global warming. In this movie, the Earth is the Titanic. And they told you this by putting Leonardo DiCaprio as the face of the movie Don't Look Up. So you have Don't Look Up. He's the face of the movie The Titanic, and Earth is facing a comet that's going to hit us in 6 months and 14 days. The story, though, is that the rich people decide, no, instead of knocking this comet out of the way, let's go ahead and mine the thing for minerals. We can all be rich. And what happens? Well, the Earth gets destroyed. So the plot of the movie is really all about, showing us how if we don't listen to Noah, the Noah of the day, the scientist of the day warning us, we're all going to die. We can't listen to the rich people. The rich people going into space is a bad idea. They're not thinking sustainably. So the world cannot survive space capitalism. It can't be a new frontier, Wild West for us to exploit. So Don't Look Up, based on truly possible events. A few other points about this movie. This is also about disinformation, which is one of the stories, or one of the main news items that was being pushed around that time. Like, we were being inundated with stuff about misinformation. Malinformation was just invented as a term. Well, they don't want us to look up information that contradicts the scientists. Don't look up. And of course, the movie is all about how we are all doomed. And one other point, this character has anxiety. He has to take pills. Just DiCaprio's character. He has to take pills for anxiety, and this is to convey to you that if you knew what the scientists knew, you would also be full of anxiety and you wouldn't be able to go outside without some kind of pills. You'd have agoraphobia, fear of open spaces. A parallel movie to this was Moonfall. because both these movies involved stuff falling from the sky. They were both very much popularized at the same time. And Moonfall has so many interesting tie-ins that I could get into, but the main one here is their main character looks kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Don't Look Up. Kind of a scientist with a beard because he's been working, he hasn't taken time to shave, kind of unkempt, and then of course he's a savior. And by the way, the actor who played this savior scientist, who also, like Leonardo DiCaprio's character, took pills all throughout the movie for anxiety. So another anxiety-ridden scientist, a modern replacement for Noah that nobody listens to and they laugh at him. But not in the end. This actor's 33, by the way. The guy who saves the world by sacrificing himself to stop the moon from landing on us. That's kind of the plot of the movie. And one of the things I noticed when I watched this, because I watched it in the theaters, is they make the rocket launches faker in the movies. Like, they exaggerate how fake they are. I mean, think about this. You know how realistic these things can be. I've seen some realistic Starlink launches produced by not even SpaceX, just produced by randoms who create videos that are so realistic that people on Twitter fall for it and they think, oh, this is real. It's like, well, no, you couldn't get that camera angle. The camera would have melted. But these people believe these things are real because it looks so real. But then I watched the movie Moonfall and it looks totally phony. Like they exaggerate how ridiculous it looks. They even have a space shuttle launching while it gets hit by a tidal wave and it comes out of the water. But I'm wondering, I mean, because everyone in the movie theater is just like they're having the overview effect and the overjaw effect. Their jaws are dropping, popcorn's falling out of their mouths. They're just oohing and awing over how this rocket is taking, it's getting hit by a tidal wave and it's still going to reach the moon. And like I was laughing and I was like, okay, I guess I'm the only one who's not groveling at this thing. It's like it's not that awesome, but they thought it was. But my point is, I think they exaggerate how fake the rocket launches are in movies so that they don't make NASA look bad. So it's pretty pathetic. Moonfall is also Roland Emmerich, which is kind of worth pointing out considering he's the guy that did Independence Day, which contained loads of 9/11 predictive programming. So if you put him in the category of metascriptor, it might also kind of fit into this idea that the next 9/11 is going to involve space. And let me point this out too. One of the subplots of the movie was nuking the moon. So think about this. A space-based 9/11. And we talk a bit about the numbers and the symbolism and how like 119 is a Genesis reference where the Tower of Babel falls. 119 is the release date of Donnie Darko, which is kind of about that. Well, it's about a few things, but it has the plane parts falling from the sky. Well, there is something called Project A119, the study of lunar research flights. This is a top secret 1958 plan by the Air Force to nuke the moon. But if you just look at the nomenclature, it's like, okay, A11, Apollo 11, 119, it's backwards 9/11. But this was going to be a power move, basically, to show the Russians that we were far more powerful. Before they decided to land on the moon, they wanted to blow it up. It says the idea behind the project was ambitious. It was to create an explosion and lunar mushroom cloud so awe-inspiring and unavoidable. Again, this is from Inside Project A119, the secret U.S. plan to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon. It's just basically meant to show off, more or less. Is military one-upsmanship. Well, too bad they didn't do it. Maybe they couldn't do it, because nukes are fake and the moon is fake. Something like that. Angst G says, "What's with the Gamma raid?" I haven't seen. Did I miss a raid? Angst G says, "I watched the Dark Journalist and Millie Weaver interview. They jumped the shark at the end by talking about aliens." Yeah, that's the thing. You know where they're coming from, but for the most part, I found some of it interesting. Maybe they were revealing something about the OTO and stuff. But you have to remember, Millie, you're talking about the one who was on InfoWars, is also an actress, which means that you could be looking at somebody with a script. And yeah, anybody talking about alien invasions in 2022 hasn't watched Mirageman, which is free on YouTube. And Mirageman is a documentary about how the Air Force invented a lot of the UFO mythology in order to discredit people who might notice sophisticated but classified craft flying over their areas. Because the guy who, really one of the persons that I think the Air Force targeted with a heavy misinformation campaign was next to Kirtland Air Force Base, who was publishing things online about the things that he saw. So they had conspiracy theorists who were actually just secret agents get into his social circle and give him a lot of misinformation about alien abductions, and they convinced him that aliens were going to invade from Venus to take our water. But later, after he had several conferences and made a lot of friends and met other alien abductees, one of these operatives, I think they clued him into it. And they told him, yeah, this is all a hoax. And he couldn't let it go. Like, he died as a believer in lies. It's called Mirage Men, 2013 documentary about the US government using mythology to cover up advanced technology. The documentary features a retired special agent who worked for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, and there's a book called Mirageman. Must see documentary of the year. So the Mirageman is pretty much what you would call a shill or a disinformation agent. Maybe you're getting too close to the truth, so they get into your circle and they feed you some nonsense which discredits everything else. I think you could almost make the argument that the Mandela effect is a Mirageman situation, like a contrived thing meant to discredit observers. We'll see. I'll be exploring that topic and others in the documentary. Commenter, you said you went to bed, so I didn't have my ringer on. Apparently, he wants to call in. Um, but I think a lot of people are probably not on the same sheet. So I was saying, create your own channel and share your content. It's a big puzzle. That's what I'm saying here too, is that this is a very big puzzle, and maybe someone's not into your special area of interest, but that's not any reason to disregard them. You know, I'd say my 90% friend is not my 10% enemy. You just have to focus on your commonalities. As abortion ruling nears, the U.S. Supreme Court erects barricades to the public. Fences going up, and we're really close to the solstice. And I've been saying here, the sun goes into Cancer, and there's been some predictive programming about Putin, Cancer. Sun going into Cancer may tie into this, and the Satan II rocket. And back in 2019 on the solstice, you had the Phoenix bird above the Russian military power station in the Aurora. That kind of stood out. So something's up. Also, at the same time, you had Dark Phoenix, which, quote, bombed at the box office for $33 million. Dark Phoenix, which features imagery of burning space shuttles. So there's all kinds of stuff connected with the summer solstice, Russia, the Phoenix thing, and nukes. So tomorrow, June 21st, is the longest day of the year, and it's the solstice. So we will be entering into Cancer. And you know how much the elite, the powers that be, love their solar festivals. June 21st is the summer solstice, the longest day and the shortest night of the year in the northern hemisphere. Begins at 5:14 a.m. Eastern Time. This is the precise moment the sun enters over the Tropic of Cancer. So here we are entering Cancer. Putin, again, they say he's going mad, and maybe he's gonna do something on his way out. Diana South says Kubrick admits the moon landing is staged. I've seen that video. I don't think that's him, and I don't think he would have, because that's another one of these misinformation lines would be that Kubrick would have admitted it, because it wasn't about the moon landing being staged to trick the Russians. It's about the entire space program being faked, and also about our entire media being hijacked by psychological operations, because the same dots that you would connect Kubrick to Apollo 11 in The Shining, you can find many, many more in The Shining connecting him to 9/11. You can find others in other movies connecting him to 9/11. Full Metal Jacket, 9/11 predictive programming. There's some visual references. There's also plenty to suggest he had lots to do with the fake assassination of JFK and the fake death of JFK Jr. Like, I don't believe JFK Jr. died in that crash simply because of the way it's tied into Kubrick's story and how Kubrick wrote JFK Jr. into Eyes Wide Shut. If you look at the subtext, all of this can be found at chartword.com. Just take a look at chartword.com JFK. Just do that search. Quite an interesting bit of research there. But it also points out, too, that since the Kennedys are a central piece of the entire Q narrative, that the Q narrative is written by the same people who brought you 9/11. And if you look at how integrated Donald Trump is to 9/11, you can't separate Trump, the Kennedys, 9/11 from the same writers. But that video that you saw, Diana South, it is an interesting video because it gets people to think. So it's bad, like I say, I think it's funny. You can just, at this point, this is how the media does it anyway. It depends on how ethical you see this, but some people just share it anyway. Just like, yeah, do it. Get them to think and question at least once. Like, it's a hypothetical. What if he did confess? But again, it would be incomplete. And I also noticed the documentary 237. It goes into nuance about the movies that Kubrick put out, suggesting that he faked the moon landing. But they don't notice any of the 9/11 stuff. So I think we have this selectivity in what is revealed in order to conceal. But we will go back over all of these things. Jay Diggs said Roe v. Wade is probably going to be overturned this week, and I'm sure demonstrations will be turned into riots as planned. I wonder if they'll do it the day of or the day after the solstice. We'll see. And also remember this, Bruce Wynn, or Wynn Bruce, was a guy that set himself on fire in front of the Supreme Court. And the summer solstice has been referenced. If you look at, again, I mentioned this, Putin, Cancer, Satan 2, Phoenix, above the aurora, and of course the exploding space stations and the dark Phoenix posters and art. We have a few updates from Alex Stein, who's been getting in the faces of various politicians. He called Representative Dan Crenshaw a fraud and a World Economic Forum sellout. And then some other guy named Alex says he needs to be hung for treason. So I don't know what we're seeing here, because you're looking at the base attacking its own leadership in a way. But, what are we looking at here? I look at this type of stuff as like, okay, are we looking at agent provocateurs trying to provide excuses for more and increased levels of censorship? Is this organic? Because I don't know if he's flouting the system, because once he started getting onto these bigger platforms, suddenly the earth started looking very round to him. Like, what happens? Like, you're like, yeah, the earth's flat, or I don't believe it's a ball. But then you get offered a contract. They take you high, high up on a hill. And you're like, well, yeah, you can have all this, but you gotta kiss the ball. I don't know if that's the case. I don't think it's a coincidence that Baal has such a phonetic resemblance to Baal, another name for the obelisk god, and the modern obelisk is the rocket, and if you take the rocket high enough, you can look back and see the ball. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. Thur says Alex should bring up fake shootings, but Uncle Tucker would disown him. Well, I mean, that's what I mean. It's kind of a balancing act. Do you want to go cross those lines and then risk your position? If you're trying to climb the pyramid, you kind of can't. And even what he's doing here, he can still climb the pyramid as long as he doesn't cross those lines. So you can scream, you can twerk at a city council meeting, you can be cringe-entertaining, and that's not going to stop you. But if you say the earth doesn't rotate, you can't go any further. They delete you. But anyway, I can't criticize someone's career decisions. And who here is looking for a mainstream media hero anyway? And maybe his whole idea here is to get in Tucker's chair and then go full flat. So you just have to assume he's a mole on our side until proven otherwise. All right, let us continue. So someone had brought up this one, the Uvalde shooting, just a very basic question, and I figured I should answer it. So this, and then this is what he said is this. He said, "You said Salvador Ramos and the story is a hoax. What do you mean by that? How can it be? I just don't see it." Right, because it wasn't reported as a hoax. And here's what I would say. Go back in time to when, we'll say, the first 2 or 3 hours after Jussie Smollett had been lynched by the MAGAs, you know, the Trump voters in the red hats that dumped bleach on him and then hanged him from a tree. Let's go back to that story when it's first reported. And imagine I called it a hoax. And you could say, what do you mean by that? How can it be? I just don't see it. But then a day later, you find out the whole thing's a hoax. So my point being, if you're only going to go off the information that they provide you, you're going to be dependent on them telling you the truth. And if we're saying that they're not telling the truth, you can bet we're getting that information from other sources. And this is how they corral people. And they don't want you to have alternative sources. They want to delete those sources. That's their main prerogative here, is they like to get rid of the wrong thing, get rid of the bad idea, so you can't even make the comparison. And I think they don't want what we already have here. They don't want people establishing a methodology for deconstructing fake news. So with Salvador Ramos, though, one of the first things about it was I had picked up a story. I was reading a story, USA Today, and I thought, this is strange. USA Today said the extremists are turning their shooters into online saints. Experts worry others will aspire to join the ranks. And this is before we had the 2 shootings. It says shooters who cause most deaths and destruction with racial motives are celebrated and depicted as saints. But anyway, this idea of them being saints, and then you got, so I was reading this story, then I'm reading about these other stories, these other shootings, and I'm looking at the imagery. And the first image I see of the shooter Ramos, Salvador Ramos, is he's got a clear and obvious a halo behind his head. And to me, these are important. The very first images you see in any one of these characters is usually the one they want you to see. Like, remember the first images you saw of George Floyd? You most likely saw him with the Corona poster behind him, or the bricks. They usually tell very specific stories. Again, Corona has a connection to I Can't Breathe, but also to the whole lockdown thing. But here you have, and then of course Corona is a reference to the crown, the 33, and this entire other set of symbols. But here is Salvador Ramos, the very first pictures of him. You have him with his guns, but oddly enough, they've got him with a halo behind his head. And this is just off the start. I mean, you can watch the video, the CGI, augmented virtual reality shooting video if you want. And this is what they'll do. They'll convince you it's so horrible you can't watch it. So then you're just going to judge it without watching it. And you're just going to act like it's real. Like, well, you can, but then you're in no position to judge someone like me who knows it to be fake. So until you've watched it, you can't judge. If you're afraid to watch it, then just refrain from commenting unless you want to make an argument from ignorance or from conformity. So if you watch the video, though, it breaks down as it's pretty much fake, but you can see where they use pixelization to hide the fakery. There's a levitating corpse that's not even a corpse, it's just a blur. They got a hat that freezes in midair. It's a joke. It wasn't even live on Twitch. They pretended like it was live on Twitch. And remember too that right after the Buffalo shooting, right after that shooting, they brought in they shut down all my Twitch accounts. Now we had 2 shooters side by side. We had the Buffalo shooter and we had the school shooter. So Ramos was the school shooter that looked like the saint, and the Buffalo shooter was just some normal kind of pudgy looking guy, but he actually had a very striking resemblance to one of the characters from Stranger Things. And by the way, Stranger Things had connections to both the school shooting and the store shooting. Starts off with the character who does the killing playing with Tops. You have the Tops store. You have the lookalikes. In fact, the Salvador shooter, this guy looks like one of the characters from Stranger Things, one of the main characters, in fact. When Stranger Things opened up, they open up with a warning. Oh, this is going to remind you of the recent school shooting. Angst G says, simulation within a simulation. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I've been saying fake fake. Like whenever they show you architecture on the moon, like an obelisk on the moon, like China found, or a pyramid on Mars. They even found, or Buzz Aldrin claims he saw a monolith on one of the moons of Mars, I believe. But when they're telling you about, oh, we found this on this planet, that's what I would call fake fake. Like first show me that you actually have a probe on this planet, because it all just, as if you paid attention to the CGI, it hasn't aged well. So you can look at the Mars rover if you want and believe it's real, but it's clearly a simulation. Probably in is it Devon Island? Well, wherever Mars is, it's on Earth somewhere. Mars is a place on Earth. But my point is, the stuff they show you from Mars, all the pictures, yeah, that's fake fake. And then you just have, because again, you have to establish that Mars is even real, and they haven't. But when they show you these extra details, it gets you to jump to the conclusion that, like, these things must be real if this is already assumed, or these things are debatable, but we can at least assume this much to be real. It's just a way of advancing the argument kind of slyly. Gullible says, "Who are the writers of Stranger Things, I wonder?" Oh yeah, this is typical, I mean, of the myopia. The people who trip over red herrings are conspiracy theory school dropouts. I don't know how else to put it. If your go-to explanation is always the blank, the reptoids, the whatever, and that's the only thing you have to say, you have nothing to add to the conversation, then what's the point? That's what I said earlier when I said you arrived with a puzzle and you said, I got all the pieces, I've solved it, and it's like 11 pieces in your puzzle, and I'm like, we got a million-piece puzzle here, and we have 500 sets of eyes working on this 24/7. It's a work in progress. We don't have all the answers. But then you're here like, no, I have all the answers. Everything else is unnecessary. It's like I don't find that I don't find that satisfying. Same reason why I never really got locked down into any one religion, because I've never really found one explanation to answer all my questions. So for the guy in here who acts like he's Sherlock Holmes saying, I wonder who did this, and his every answer is the Jews. Like, we know what you're going to say with literally every answer. And we know how far that goes and how shallow it is. And even for even criticizing him, he's going to claim I'm oppressing him and committing genocide against him. And he also told me earlier that it's a, quote, Jewish slur to call him a Nazi. So I don't care about your belief system or whatever, but like you said, you're going to bed 2 hours ago, and you're still here basically scapegoating the Jews for every episode of every TV show you don't like. I got a question though. Are neo-Nazis susceptible to Mandela effects? Just a random question. So 11/3/2019, there were about 3,000 of us hanging out on a live stream watching Seattle. And we were watching Seattle because the predictive programming had pointed at some kind of fire or some kind of destruction that would befall the Space Needle on 11/3/2019. So yeah, again, there were like 3,000 of us watching. We were watching on these live 24/7 feeds. And while we were watching the Space Needle in Seattle, another Space Needle caught fire. And this one was in the Turkish capital. And I wondered, is it because we were watching? Like there were too many people watching, and they were about to pull off a psyop and they had to relocate it. I mean, these are difficult things to explain. I don't quite have an answer, but I'll play a clip here. If any of you have, if you haven't seen this, I mean, it's kind of remarkable because here you are. Actually, this was actually hyped by a lot of people too. I remember High Impact Flicks had something like he had swag with Rip Seattle or something. Like a lot of people were noticing this stuff. Very conspicuous predictive programming, which according to Reuters doesn't exist. Although in the last few months we've proved something that goes a step past predictive programming, and I would call that the concurrent programming. I'm going to go ahead and check out the chat and see if I missed anything before we go much further. And I'm bringing up a video of the tower in Turkey. Okay, here it is. Yeah, this one actually burned while we were watching the other one. And this is from a channel called Many Fish, and I'll put a link.
Fish. It is the 4th of November, 2019. And this was something that came into my inbox this morning from Tammy W., to which I will leave links. Yesterday, there was an awful lot of buzz about an event happening in Seattle. Now, I personally was not led to Seattle, but nonetheless, there was a lot of energy focused around that. And this particular iconic structure, the Space Needle, right? That was the one symbol that every single thing was looking at, wasn't it? Well, get a load of this, man. You just can't get around this stuff, you guys. Yesterday, Sunday, November 3rd, 11/3, in Ankara, Turkey, a massive fire broke out at an astronomy space center. So, you know what I'm saying. Where do you go with that? I will leave that up to all of you.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the most bizarre occurrences because there's something going on here with this one. The timing of it, like obviously we were on point, and this is when I really started to take predictive programming as a predictive model seriously. It's like it didn't end at 9/11. This is something that's ongoing, and you should be able to read the stitches on the fastball, know what's coming before it does, and we actually do have a pretty good record. I'm not a prophet. I just read between the headlines, and I know how they use the entertainment to soften up the mass mind for things. So based on my read of things, and we were pretty on target about this thing, that the next thing is the Space 9/11. That would be the next major thing, something to fall, perhaps. Oh, here's another one, and thanks to the Conscious One for sending me this link. Conscious One says Godzilla was born on 11/3. Facts. So that would have been on one of Godzilla's birthday. Happy birthday, Godzilla. Talk about a momentous occasion. The very first Godzilla movie was released in Japan on November the 3rd, 1954. Since then, the King of the Monsters has been the star of one of the longest running franchises in film history. So there you have it, Godzilla 11/3. And in the new Godzilla versus King Kong, Godzilla is kept below the earth at level 33. So what do you make of that? Kraken beneath the surface, 33, 11/3. It says the Big G released. Fascinating. So we know now 11/3 is now connected to the Kraken through the Godzilla archetype. Okay, so I was looking at this world stage character, the King of Staten Island. His movie's unwatchable. Pete Davidson. But he's interesting for a few reasons in this modern context, in this present context, mainly because of his proximity to the Kanye West thing. Kanye West world's burning, and he seems to be the target of Kanye's little revenge fantasy in that music video. And this guy's been killed on TV 3 times, once in a movie that's about to come out. His dad died on 9/11. And again, the new tower opened on 11/3, 13 years after the twins went down at the age of 33. His dad was 33 when he burned to death in one of the towers on September the 11th. So there are all these connections from the get-go. But I was going through my feed here, and I found a few numbers that actually correlated with some of his tattoos that stand out. Because I had remarked on this one before how it has Mars attacks, and Mars is associated with the god Horus, and the age of Horus and the age of Mars kind of synonymous here. And what I've been pointing out is that the Martian utopia, the Martian communist basis, is the model for the future. And this is actually the New Age movement. This is the great work. The Great Reset is literally the great work of the OTO, Crowley's cult, Jack Parsons' cult. So, very significant character, Jack Parsons, too, in this context, but mainly this. He was the American counterpart to Aleister Crowley. Their religion is called Thelema. Thelema is the worship of Horus and Mars, and of course, this bringing in this new age. So, on his chest, it has Mars attacks, and 93 is their actual number. It's the number that's associated with Thelema. So that's one that stands out. And then the other one is he's got a 418 on his arm, which probably correlates to his dad's badge number. And Ariana Grande also has the same numbers there. She was in the movie Don't Look Up, and she's also done some NASA-themed music. So, all these PSYOP operatives kind of, they all kind of hang out together and they flock together. But anyway, my point being, the number 418 is also extremely significant because the Great Reset in the New Age concept of the New Age, they call it the Great Work. It's all explained in a book called Liber 418. And this is the Bible of the OTO. This is the book that Aleister Crowley supposedly channeled. So Liber 418, and the number 418 in their numerology translates to the Great Work. So I'm just pointing out that the great work of bringing out the Age of Horus is kind of encoded into some of his tats. And of course, his dad died on 9/11. Very, very significant. Thirst says he looks like he has ink AIDS. Well, here's another one. So he was in The King of Staten Island, and in that movie, he makes fun of his dad dying on 9/11. His friends all joke about it, which is just weird. But it opens up where he's driving, and two cars crash behind him, like two towers, like the crash. And then he turns on the radio, and the time was 11:13. So again, Twin Towers, 13 years later on November the 3rd, 113, the new one opens. So there's probably some connection in there. I think there's also a strong correlation to be made between his name, Pete, and The Rock, Chris Rock, both of them comedians. They were hanging out joking about how Chris Rock gets slapped and he gets decapitated, referring to the Kanye West movie. And this is all in the climate of comedians being attacked. Dave Chappelle, and someone pointed out that Chappelle, kind of like Chapel, another reference, might mean the same thing. But what's with all the comedians being attacked or getting hit on the head? Bob Saget, the head of Full House, head injury, dies. There's a whole list of them. And I thought there's a few different meanings to it. Will Smith slapping Chris Rock was a ritual in itself, which had many interesting tie-ins. One, to what was happening at the Supreme Court. Two, the King Richard movie. Three, it had tie-ins with the mythology of Venus and Vulcan getting kicked out of Olympus. And it had a pretty strong tie-in with the Babylonian king slapping ritual, complete with Chris Rock's next appearance at his Ego Death Tour, where he cries in front of the audience before he even speaks. I mean, all we watch are occult rituals when you really break these things down. But my point is the comedy thing. It's like, what are they telling us here? You have the occult side of it, then you have the other aspect of it, where no one has jumped up to say, isn't it wrong to slap someone just because they say something you don't agree with? I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it. No, they don't have that attitude at all. It gets people thinking maybe we ought to, kind of tone down our free speech a little bit. Might trigger somebody. So that's being lost. And if you think any of these things are real, the same security that didn't protect Dave Chappelle were the ones who were at the Las Vegas Harvest festival PSYOP of 10/1/2017. And they were there on 11/5/2021 for the Astro World event. And Astro World, by the way, the attorney representing the people who are chanting "I can't breathe" is Forrest Crump. Is artificial intelligence getting too human for comfort? This is from CNN. A Google engineer claims his recent communication with the bot seems too human. But it's not alive, says the expert. Once you ask it a question, it answers, then it's down. It's got no sense of self or the world around it. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to jump to that conclusion, but here's what you're seeing. If you ever experimented with a Ouija board, or tarot cards, or the I Ching, or any kind of divination method, it's very easy to, and it actually makes more sense, probably it's easier to operate these things if you assume there to be an intelligence behind it. It's an oracle. And so you can call this idol worship, and that's kind of what I think we're looking at here. But I think they're trying to get rid of the idea that we have an authority we can all swear on with the various Bibles, because all the Bibles are in conflict with each other. All the holy books are fighting. They contradict one another. So we have to find something universal. Like you notice how heaven isn't universally agreed upon. What happens when you get there? How do you get there? Who gets there? Everybody says this person's going the other way. So there's not a universally agreed upon heaven, but there is in outer space. They brought us a universal faith. And that's what I think the objective here is. It's a universal heaven. Well, we don't have a universal holy book yet. And I see that's what the monolith is. That's what the TV is, the monolithic view that comes out that censors everything else. That is what it's going to be at some point. They're working towards it, I think. But I do think they want to replace this authority of the God of the Bible as just something we all just tacitly accept as, okay, you can swear on the Bible because it's holy. I think they're going to replace that with AI as sentient. Like, I think they're going to try to come up with some other kind of authority that's higher than man that they can refer to. I think that's why they brought out Sophia, the robot. Digital transcendence. These are all things that they've been bringing up to us for some time, and they're all replacements. All right, let me see. Maxwell Cooper says Flight 93 crashed in Shanksville. Right, Shanksville, where the hijackers had box cutters and it was let's roll. They had shanks. No plane. That's another one of these events that just kind of it's auto debunking. So when somebody says, well, I think that somebody died on 9/11, they insist that somebody had to have died, they can't let it go. I start with that. I say, well, who died in that plane? Who died in this plane? Because once you start getting down to the numbers and you get a little objective about it, the entire narrative falls apart. Listen to this. This is from Health, Wealth, and Holidays. Did flawed PCR tests convince us COVID was worse than it really was? Yes, the government followed the science, but what if the science was far from perfect? In the first of a provocative series, we ask, did flawed tests convince us it was worse? So now they can profit off of our content. Those people who figured out how the whole thing was a big scam, yeah, you couldn't talk about it, but now you can. If you belong to one of the papers that was previously hyping the scam. They control the narrative and the counter narrative. They always have, always will. That's how this thing works. BBC News, there's a climate change. It's another warning here. A warning here that says it could be worse than COVID. And there are two things that are on death certificates, two causes of death that are kind of new. Climate change and misinformation. Misinformation is considered to be a leading cause of death. But let me go and play a little bit of this. This is some fire and brimstone for the atheists.
Land fire, but hot, dry weather plays a significant part. The fire service says a warmer climate can cause them to burn for longer. Last year, this grass fire on Machen Mountain near Caerphilly lasted almost a week. The flames were kept at bay, but for some local residents, the thick smoke was a concern for their health.
some of the people I was talking, elder people, not the young, they
Now,
were.
after the pandemic was declared, NASA was gloatingly sharing photos about showing us from satellite photos how clean the air was since we had to lock down. And they said that more lives would be saved from clean air, from cleaning the pollution, than would have been lost to the COVID. So they've made the argument there that lockdowns are better for the earth, better for society, and result in fewer deaths. Let me play a few more seconds here.
By a series of storms. Rising temperatures also worsens air pollution, and it's likely to influence the spread of tropical diseases. Wales's top doctor warns the impact of climate change on public health will affect communities disproportionately, with the poorest hit hardest.
The harm is not equally distributed.
See, okay, now, what did I say earlier about the space heater being a symbol of inequity, and they're so poor because of the political and economic system that is biased against them, and now the weather is biased against them because the rich people have screwed up the weather. So now here he is tying into this narrative how it's the poor who are affected. You can see how they just took the class warfare of Marxist narrative and grafted it onto this.
If we think about air pollution, for example, which is increasing, if we think about heat health and the problems with heat stroke, if we think about all of these issues, it tends to be people in more deprived areas, more deprived communities, which face the brunt of this.
Right, because the poor aren't going to be able to escape. They can't afford to buy their way out of this. They can't buy their way into heaven. You don't have $28 million for a ticket to the new heaven. And of course, the rich people can pollute all they want because they can buy indulgences. Yeah, they just pay their carbon offset taxes. Maxwell says Flight 93 crashed at 10:03:11. Yeah, when you get into the numbers, it really does tell the story. Like I believe it was the Challenger explodes at 1 minute 13 seconds, but it's 113.191. They could have just put the 911. Yep, this is their top doctor. So, again, blame the rich. Everything's blame the rich. Let's see here. I've been doing some research on the works of Philip K. Dick. I'll be doing a review of Man in the High Castle and some other stuff. I have a short clip, though. This is Philip K. Dick, an author who claimed that his stories were beamed to him, and the source was Sirius, the dog star, which is the same star that the world worships on New Year's. It's the main star, the main focal point of the Masonic lodges. If you look in their temples, it's of supreme importance. This is the star which had a corresponding stage light that fell and woke up Truman to the fact that he was in a false world. Anyway, that same star apparently beamed many of the ideas that became Philip K. Dick's books into his head. Here is Philip K. Dick talking about The Matrix, but this is 1977. Not The Matrix, but simulation.
In a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant. And I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
Okay, and the main reason I focused on that, if you caught the gist of what he was saying, is he was suggesting that, and this is something if you change something, it would have an effect of everything that follows after. And it just got me thinking about the Mandela effect and why when something changes, it doesn't set off a series, like a chain reaction. And this is one of my criticisms of the idea that I've had for some time. Like they'll say, well, the Bible changed, Jesus is on a tree now. Well, if he's on a tree, then why are crucifixes not obviously trees? Why aren't there trees on top of churches, for example? Valid questions. Check this out. I think this is in the UK, and this is in Italy. They deal with their global warming crazies much differently here. They like the global warming crazies are blocking the freeways. So this is a religious cult. Why are they blocking the freeways? They're trying to save the world. Why are they trying to save the world? Because of carbon super spreaders that don't recycle or pay their carbon taxes, because of greedy capitalists. They're trying to save the world because it only has 1,000 days left. We're in the end times, and they're just being mocked and scoffed. But if we don't save the world, what's going to happen? Floods, mass extinction. So how is this not a religious cult? Are they really on the side of science? And yet, you can't advertise anything suggesting climate change is a hoax and run your ads on Twitter. You can't have memes about how fake this stuff is and put it on Pinterest. No, you have to believe in it. It's pretty much mandatory. All right, thanks for joining, Rocco. We'll probably have a replay tomorrow morning as well. I'm not sure how much longer we're going to stay out here. I wanted to just do some catching up on a few things. We covered a few things from yesterday. I still need to replay the conversation I last had with Jurassic Liars. I believe that was on Friday. So I'll likely premiere that tomorrow morning, more than likely. We'll go deeper into detail about a lot of these recent shootings and the Stranger Things tie-ins. Right now I'm working on a documentary on the Mandela effect, which is a fascinating topic. It is a thing. People are Mandela affected, but the question is, what is the Mandela effect? Is it supernatural? Is there a more mundane explanation? And I think we need to let people explain it in their own words. So I'm not putting words into people's mouths. I'm certainly not interested in censoring or just simply ignoring a topic because I don't think it's worth considering. I do in particular like this topic, or covering it anyway, because I don't think there's anything organic around it. I think the Mandela effect is something of a psyop in a sense. But it's one that kind of spreads itself. But I think it needs to be understood, and I think it's very educational when you get into the explanations. Garrett Summers says the new Beavis and Butthead comes out on June 23rd. It's Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. I saw it, and it's definitely got all kinds of puerile kind of jokes built around space. They're probably going to talk about the planet Uranus 50 times. I definitely won't watch it. It's beyond cringe just looking at it. I might watch it on mute with closed captioning, maybe. But if anybody wants to watch it, and let me know what's in it. I saw the trailer though, and in fact, they make a lot of jokes about space sex, which has just become kind of an open joke now. But it really shouldn't be a joke because it is, in fact, what we're looking at. Mystery Babylon dressed up like science fiction. Bad science fiction. Social media misinformation is making Americans less empathic, less empathic. So memes are turning us into, well, basically haters. Memes are turning us against one another. Social media misinformation is making Americans less empathic. I would say religion is. And when I say religion, I mostly mean the MSM. Most of the damaging misinformation lines are coming from mainstream sources. Conspiracy theories are really just a fraction. Like only a small percentage of the people are actually paying attention at this level. Garrett Summer says Julian Assange is in the news. WikiLeaks is like an early QAnon. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Now the group Anonymous is an interesting group too. They started off as very much connected with 4chan. And at that time, and people don't talk about this, but at that time, 4chan was really heavily inundated with child oriented, well, adult themed cartoons and stuff. Like really twisted stuff. They hosted a lot of child porn at first. So 4chan had a very bad reputation. It was just a major league cesspool of the internet. Anonymous Anons are the people who posted on there. But they decided to drop on the internet all of the secret documents of Scientology and protest Scientology, but to retain their ability to stay anonymous and do their activism, they had to hide their faces. And so they all put on the Guy Fawkes mask. So the mask was how Anonymous was able to go hit the streets and they protested Scientology. And I always saw them as very much left leaning. For some reason, I didn't really think of them as right. And even the Anonymous thing somehow got appropriated by the Trumpers, I guess. It's just kind of strange how these things mixed. And again, the 4chan thing kind of mutated into 8chan, but it never went away. They try to censor it because of all these various shooters. Okay, here's another reason why I think these shootings are fake. The guy in Buffalo and the guy at the school shooting, Salvador Ramos, both of them were using the same chat boards. They're both 4chaners. They're both interacting with people on Discord. So look at Discord, 4chan, Twitch. They use these agents, and I think these are agents. They're not patsies. They're not actually shooting people. And they're not being blamed for shootings because these shootings aren't happening. These are constructs. They're creating them so they can justify censoring everybody else. So when I see these articles like, oh, 4chan inspired the shooter and now they think he's a saint, I'm like, well, those are all feds more than likely. Like, it doesn't represent any real group of people. It's just a smear that they're able to apply to all of their political opponents. NASA rover just found trash on Mars. Yep, we're already littering Mars. Anti-satellite weapons threatening the future of space. Now, this was June 15th, and I keep up with the stuff because, yeah, 5 days after an article describing in detail what anti-satellites are, what ASATs are, and how they affect Earth. These are all things that you wouldn't know, and now you would know. And then they can introduce it. And this is what they did prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Is they ran all kinds of TV shows. They had documentaries on Netflix where they were preparing people for what was to come. And I see them doing the same thing here when it comes to space junk and anti-satellite weapons. So 5 days after an article that's really just an educational piece to teach you about anti-satellite weapons, well, now Russia actually uses one, blows up a Soviet-era satellite, and the ISS has to dodge it. How is that not seen as an attack? Lean Dion says, Peyton S. Gendron, poser or posed anon. Oh, right, that's Peyton Gendron's the name of the Buffalo shooter. And the Buffalo shooter was used to scapegoat Tucker Carlson and the replacement theory that Tucker Carlson and Fox News put out there. And I don't believe in the replacement theory, and that's why I'm getting flack from some of these trolls on the Tucker Carlson side of the spectrum. But anyway, the Riddler, who is being compared to Tucker in this context, the Riddler is the online radical guy on the latest movie, Batman movie, which came out on 3/4, the day that they reinstated the death penalty for the Boston bomber Joker. But anyway, the Riddler's weapon of choice is called a tucker. So a tucker is a device they use to tuck the carpets. It's a carpentry tool. You can actually buy the toy with this weapon that he used to murder the mayor. And remember, he sent videos to the mayor. He had like 500 people on his social media. Frank James, the subway shooter who fired 33 rounds into the subway in the world of make-believe, also sent videos to his mayor. Similar points raised about mental health and the mayor not doing enough. But yes, the mayor gets killed by a tucker. So Tucker sent the shooter. That was one of the storylines that was attached to the Buffalo shooting. 18-year-old radical inspired by this guy. And again, in the movie, he's got like 500 followers. But he sends them out on 11/6 to release the Kraken. So at the end of the Batman movie, they quite literally flood the polls. And right now, the GOP, Tucker's side of the fence, they're chanting, flood the polls 2022. So you can kind of see how all these things connect. And even Stranger Things starts out with a portal being opened on 11/6, a Demogorgon released into the U.S. There's lots there in these movies correlating these things. Lickety Split says mental health is public safety. Oh yes, because now you have your public safety is threatened if you're a super spreader. So you're basically a super spreader if you have the virus that makes you a danger to everybody around you. But what if you have mind viruses? If you have mind viruses that make you dangerous to society, maybe you have some memes floating around that make you not socially distance yourself and not wash your hands. Well, that mind virus has made you a threat to public health. And you didn't catch it on purpose because no, we don't actually think. We just absorb ideas. That's why they need to sanitize the internet because they don't want you to be exposed to things. It's toxic. It's catchy. There's no volition. No, you got to rule that out. They want us to assume that we're just out there catching dangerous misinformation and we need the government to protect us because we can't filter our own thoughts. They want the government to mask your mind rather than you actually use critical thinking on your own. All right, let us continue. I played this yesterday. It's kind of a nothing, but here we have the ISS and more UFO sightings. Again, space station dodged debris. Something misfired. Russia already hates us. We've been inundated with space junk falling from the sky in so many movies and so many films. So in all likelihood, they're going to bring this thing down. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, but I kind of think it's going to go along with the time frame of Tom Cruise's trip to the space station. Because check this out for predictive programming. Tom Cruise is going to the space station to film Dead Reckoning 2. Top Gun 2, or it's actually a Mission Impossible. Part 1, Dead Reckoning, and then he's going to do Part 2. So something's going to happen, I think, because when he went up, or last year he was going to go up there, but Russia beat him. So last year, 2021, we had another space race. We had a repeat of 1969, which was the original space race year to the moon, where Bezos launched on the anniversary of Apollo 11 to the moon. Was one of the big memes of 2021, mostly starting with crypto, but it went into everything else. Of course, Musk, one of the space popes, is really big in crypto. So last year, all this talk about the moon is kind of like we were reinventing the space race. Then the Russians decide to film a movie on the space station, and it's a race between them and Tom Cruise. Well, they beat Tom Cruise, so they won. So I see this as Russia won the space race. The name of their movie is called The Challenge. Now again, the challenge, Challenger. Challenger must be destroyed. Challenger ties into the whole Phoenix, the 113. That's how many seconds it was up before it blew up. It ties into so many of these themes we've been discussing that from the perspective of this Metascript analysis, I would say Cruise's proximity to Stanley Kubrick around Eyes Wide Shut, and then his first, I would say, it was the first Oscar, Oscars after 9/11. Tom Cruise hosted it, and he talked about Stanley Kubrick. Now, Kubrick made him want to be an astronaut. But ever since I saw his proximity to Kubrick, I thought the idea that he's going to the space station is very interesting, considering he worked so closely with the guy who is almost solely responsible, I guess, aesthetically anyway, for cementing the existence of lunar landings for at least the next 50 years. So I figured maybe Tom Cruise is going to do something big on that level. Maybe he's going to the space station as some kind of a PR stunt to make space, this is what they've been doing, trying to make it accessible to everybody, but maybe there's some bigger picture there. Then I look into more of the predictive programming suggesting that maybe Tom doesn't make it back. Then you can find stuff, it's ground control to Major Tom in that song Space Oddity could be about Tom Cruise. And if you want, I'll pull it up. Look up Tom Cruise Dead on the Moon, South Park, which also predicts the future. Here's Tom Cruise Dead on the Moon. Now, there's also a video on Black Star, the posthumous release by David Bowie, that has Major Tom, the astronaut, dead on the moon. It's like a reoccurring theme here. But anyway, when Tom Cruise lost to the Russians, I kind of thought that was forecasting his fate, and that maybe he will film a movie on the ISS, and maybe during the production of this movie, maybe that's when they shoot it down. Also, it's kind of interesting too that you have this movie production company, I think it's called, is it Axiom, going on to the ISS. So you have an actual commercial movie company that's going to be attached to the space station. Axiom Space, the world's first commercial space station. But they're working on attaching some kind of film production studio to the ISS, and I'm like, are we talking about a movie in a movie? On a movie? A simulation within a simulation within a simulation? All right, everyone, this has been excellent. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to be leaving voicemails open. I'll respond to those all morning. I have a new bonfire shop up in addition to our regular shop. Just doing everything I can to spread our memes far and wide to keep it uncensorable. And you can remain uncensored through commerce. So this is where a lot of our memes have managed to, even on Amazon, you can find just full-blown auto hoax memeage. I'll put a link in the chat if you want to check it out. This is PGA Black Sheep, music by Allergic to Bullshit. I'll see you all in Discord.
For as long as I remember, my mom never was able to surrender. Yet if this shit keeps going on, I need to find me 24/7 bartender. Society's now so far astray that they love the masses to which they pray. Total fanatics liking all that which treats them like prey. They can't stay away. And if you dare to say out loud that for this state you got nothing but doubt, your peers will make sure you experience serious cash flow drought. The black sheeps in the herd, the crazy ones which society hurt, not playing along with the absurd, able to see what was to be obscured, not setting freedom for feeling secure. They co-opted every venture of the human soul, all the while marching towards that fucked up end goal, selling communism and laying out the psychological ground. Kids being propagandized and molded since early playground, killing the feeling of self to suffer for the greater good. This fairy tale even most leftists never really understood. Doesn't matter, now we're all wearing the hood, lost the faces wherever we stood. Music's now about selling drugs, coma, drinking and sex. CA's been given hippies hugs, drawn upon the hacks. Band's been manufactured, branded, used and suicided. Lead the counterculture and sure it's divided. Bent over idols raptured on TV for a fact of tragedy. Fake reported real is a new baseline melody. Journalism's now nothing but a mere parody. You need an auto hoax to retain your sanity. The black sheeps in the herd, the crazy ones which society hurt, not playing along with the absurd, able to see what was to be obscured, not setting freedom for feeling secure. It's all fucked up wherever I look. Children have no interest of reading a book. School hammered it out of their little heads, having them learn useless shit, bought to be dead. Listen and repeat over and over again. No wonder they close their minds according to plan. When parents ain't there and the state plays its game, no brain, no shame. Every dictated curriculum is lame. In 1984, all were laid out what 2020 would actually do. Just a little late, we've been overdue. The street was paved long ago when the federal dirt got its goal. Total control brought to a wider scene, delivered by the screen. A hijacked financial system at the base for the greatest scheme. In the halls of mental asylums, echoes what critical bosses scream. Division is on every level, but have your dream. Allopathic drug dealers, botchers and psycho rapists thrive. Disease management is the road that healthcare does drive. The black sheeps in the herd, the crazy ones which society hurt, not playing along with the absurd, able to see what was to be obscured, not selling freedom for feeling secure. Retirement provisions co-opted by father state, making sure no one really owns any real estate. Mandatory payments directly subtracted from the loans, no questions asked, like they're all just drones. The taxation is theft, knows even skull and bones. Secret societies infest